Kings chapter 5. We're still in a section that is focusing on the ministry of Elisha. And what I found interesting is 2 Kings chapter 5 is probably one of the most remembered stories concerning Elisha. However, he is very much what you might call a minor character in this story. He does play a very important role, but he's not in it very much. Anyways, here we'll probably won't read through the whole chapter at first, but just to read through some of it here. 2 Kings chapter 5 verse 1. It says, "Now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and honorable, because by him, this is an interesting statement, by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And she said unto her mistress, Would God my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of his leprosy. And one went in and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, Go, and I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. And he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, and 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of raiment. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, Now when this letter is come unto thee, behold, I have therewith sent Naaman my servant to thee, that thou mayest recover him of his leprosy. And it came to pass, when the king of Israel read the letter, that he rent his clothes, and he said, Am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man doth send me to recover a man of his leprosy? Wherefore consider, I pray you, and see how he seeketh a quarrel against me. And it was so, when Elisha the man of God had heard that the king of Israel had rent his clothes, that he sent to his king, saying, Wherefore hast thou rent thy clothes? Let him come now to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. Now, so Naaman came with his horses and with his chariot, and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger unto him, saying, Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. But Naaman was wroth, and he went away, and he said, Behold, I thought, he will surely come out to me, and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and strike his hand over this place, and recover the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar rivers of Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and he went away in a rage. And his servant came near, and he spake unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee to do some great thing, wouldst thou not have done it? How much rather then, when he saith unto thee, Wash and be clean? And then he went down and he dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God. And his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. And so here we have a look here at the captain of the host of the Syrian army. And this man is named Naaman. And like I said, this is probably one of the more well-known stories involving Elisha, even though he plays, like I said earlier, a minor role. But Naaman is such a fascinating character, because here in verse 1, he is described overwhelmingly positive. He is captain of the host of the king of Syria. He's a great man with his master. He's honorable. And then it says, because by him, by Naaman, the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor. So you have positive description after positive description after positive description. And here we actually see that Naaman was actually used as a means by which God granted the Syrians victory. And just as a side note, one thing I love about this particular verse, as just almost as an afterthought, the author of Kings here throws in the fact that, oh, by the way, God's not just the God of Israel. He's the God of all nations. He's the God of all people. God determined for Syria to be victorious, and so he used Naaman as the means to bring the victory to the people of Syria. And so again, he's not just the God of Israel. He's just God. He's God of the universe. And so here Naaman is, again, seen to be this honorable, great, mighty man of valor. All these wonderful things. And then you get to the end of verse 1, and it says, But he was a leper. Now, just as a note, I just throw this in here. A lot of people get kind of up in arms about leprosy in the Bible. And they'll say that it's not actual leprosy. Because, for instance, later on when Naaman is healed, the text mentions that his skin becomes like a little child. And then whereas we didn't read it, we'll see it at the end. Gehazi is going to get leprosy. And it said that he went out as a leper as white as snow. And leprosy today, what we call Hansen's disease, leprosy today doesn't cause whiteness of the skin like that. But leprosy here was probably a catch-all term to deal with a variety of skin diseases or diseases in general. And so when the Bible uses the term leprosy, it was a nasty, just wicked disease that would kill a person, but it might not be the exact strain of Hansen's disease that we call leprosy today. Some people get all up in arms about this. I don't really see a reason to get all that upset about it. So he gets what the Bible is calling a leprosy, okay, some kind of serious skin disease. And so God obviously is using this man. Naaman is in a high position, captain of the Syrian army, but obviously he has this disease. He's a leper, and if you've read through the Old Testament or the New Testament as well, it just doesn't mention it as much. But we understand the danger of somebody having leprosy, as it was highly contagious, particularly in Israel. If somebody was a leper and it was confirmed to be leprosy, they would have to literally keep their distance from everybody and shout. If somebody were to get within a certain distance of them, they would have to shout unclean, right? So the person would not get close enough to contract the disease. It was a nasty, nasty thing. And so obviously this puts Naaman in a difficult position. And so here God is going to use a very unlikely source to be the catalyst for Naaman's healing. And so this comes with another unnamed person. We've had several of these in 2 Kings already. But here is another unnamed person in this little maid girl. So verse 2, the Syrians have gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And I find that fascinating. I'll talk about that in a second. And she said unto her mistress, would God, my Lord, were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of his leprosy. And so here you have this little girl who was stolen away from the land of Israel. We don't know how old she is, but she's old enough to have an understanding that, first of all, that she has a strong faith in God, and she has the wits about her to be honorable to not just her master, but the one who would have been responsible for her being in Syria in the first place, right? Whether or not Naaman was actually leading the charge, as captain of the host, he would have been the one who gave the orders for them to go into Israel and to capture people and bring them back to Syria. And so here she is serving him in his house, or in particular his wife. But here she is showing honor to the very man who, again, was responsible for her being ripped away from her own family and taken into Syria as this little slave girl is what she was. And yet, again, she shows a tremendous faith in God. She shows honor to her master. And so she, another unnamed individual in a long line of unnamed people here in 2 Kings who are showing themselves to be people of great faith. And so here she is in this very, very difficult situation, but she shows faith not only that that God would be able to heal him, but faith in the ability of Elisha to make sure that was done. Right? Would to God that Naaman was in Israel. Would to God that he was with the prophet that is in Samaria, because God would heal him. And so she has a complete and total faith in God's ability and in the ability of the prophet. Now, word of this, again, very fascinating. Word of this gets to the king of Syria, and he listens to this. He takes the advice of this unnamed slave girl, and he decides to send this emissary of people and gifts to the king of Israel, where, and I'll say this, the king's name is never given, but most people, and I agree, think this is probably King Jehoram. And so King Jehoram here in Israel, he sends an emissary of people and gifts to him for the purpose of seeing Naaman be healed. Now, again, assuming it's Jehoram, he is distraught over this. He actually is very, very displeased by this. It says, verse 7, that when the king of Israel had read the letter, that he rent his clothes, and he said, am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man does send me to recover a man of his leprosy? Wherefore consider, I pray you, and see how he seeketh a quarrel against me. And so in the mind of Jehoram, he's thinking two things. Number one, I don't think God's going to heal this guy. Now, we don't know if he even considered it possible for God to heal somebody. Again, the kings of Israel were not godly people. They were pagans. They believed in a whole lot of things that were not biblical. And so we don't know what level of faith this guy had in God at all. And then secondly, he thought this was a trap. He thought Syria is using this as a way to say, We gave you all these gifts. We were told you could heal him, and now you didn't. So this just gives us means to, to come down and just roll over Israel. That's what Jehoram is expecting. That's what he thinks, and so he's pretty distraught over all this. Well, somehow in verse 8, somehow Elisha hears, whether or not he was there or just somebody tells him. Somehow Elisha hears about what's happening. And so he tells the king, again, assuming it's Jehoram, he tells Jehoram, he says, let him come to me. And he says that he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. And so again, for Elisha, this is another test. This is a test for God to prove himself, not only to the king, because again, I don't think the king expected it to be possible, but he was going to be able to prove himself to the king of Israel, but also to Naaman. He was going to prove himself to the king of Syria. God was going to show himself to be God of over all. And again, you have to consider this in the pagan context of the time in which it's written, where they had gods for everything, right? And so they had health gods, fertility gods, all these other things. And you would go bring your sacrifice, and you were supposed to be able to get a blessing from that particular god. Well, clearly for Naaman, that didn't work, right? He still has his leprosy. He's still sick. And so God was going to, again, he was going to prove himself, which he has done time and time again in the book of Kings and now 2 Kings a few times. And so he comes to the house of Elisha, and it's a very interesting turn of events here. Naaman shows up. And again, remember who he is. This isn't just any old Syrian, right? This is one of the highest ranking officials from the Syrian government. And here he comes to the house of this prophet, and he's expecting a lot. He's expecting pomp. He's expecting circumstance. He's expecting Elisha to come out and meet him and greet him and perform some type of ceremony that would be akin to something the false prophets would have done. And I threw in the reference there, 1 Kings 18. This is Elijah on Mount Carmel. And if you remember when Elijah is facing off against the false prophets of Baal, what did they do? They were screaming, they were shouting, they were cutting themselves until blood was rushing all over the sacrifice. They were doing all these things because that was very typical behavior for pagan prophets. And that's the kind of thing, whether or not he expected that specifically, that's the kind of thing that Naaman would have been expecting. I'm expecting some big deal to be made, not only because that's what the prophets that he's used to, that's what they do, but also I'm the captain of the host. I'm a big deal, right? This isn't just anybody. I'm an important individual. And so Naaman is expecting a lot. And what he got was not even Elisha. Elisha doesn't even come. Elisha sends a messenger, verse 10. He sends a messenger to him that says, you just need to go wash in the Jordan 7 times. That's all you got to do. Just go wash in the Jordan 7 times. Well, Naaman's not happy about this. Again, this is not what he expected. He expected something greater. He expected something bigger. At bare minimum, he expected the prophet himself to be the one to tell him this, and he doesn't get any of that. And so he's mad. In fact, he gets to the point where he's going to leave. And so we see there at the end of verse 12, he says, so he turned and went away in rage. And so he was really upset about this because he was expecting something far different. And I think this is a very important part of the story because here you have Naaman, this man of high stature, an important individual, one who is described for us at the beginning of the chapter very positively. And yet, when he's exposed and he's shown the reality of the situation that he's in, he doesn't like it. And so here you have Naaman expecting to be treated in such a way, and yet Elisha treats him as nothing more than a leper that needed to be healed, because that's what he was. He may have had the title, he may have had riches, he may have had notoriety, he may have been called a great man, but at the end of the day, Naaman was a leper. And so Elisha treated him as he was. And so Naaman didn't like this. And I'll say this, nobody likes it when the reality of who they are is exposed. I've said this 100 times in the past. The gospel is offensive because the gospel opens a window and shows you who you actually are. And people don't like to be told you're not as good as you think you are. And that's exactly what's happening here with Naaman. And so Elisha, again, he doesn't even come out and tell him this. He sends a messenger. I think we can assume the text doesn't tell us this, but I think we can assume that Elisha does not come out to send a message. It's not that Elisha doesn't come out just because he's worried about getting leprosy. I think specifically Elisha knows this is going to have the biggest impact for Naaman if I don't even show up. And so he sends his messenger. Naaman gets mad, and he gets mad because Elisha's right. Elisha's right about this. He is just a leper. And so the reality was exposed because the truth of God was revealed here. And so it's at this particular point that another servant, another unnamed servant, was needed to come in and speak some sense into the situation. And he simply tells Naaman, he says, listen, if he had come out and told you to do this amazingly large, long, difficult task, you would have thought, that's great, that's wonderful, and you would have done all that. He says, all he asked you to do was go dip in the water. And Naaman, previously he said, why did it even have to be that? The waters in Damascus are so much cleaner. Why do I have to go dip in dirty Israel water? But he's like, that's all he asked you to do. All he asked you to do is go dip in the water, go cleanse yourself 7 times. And if he had asked you to do some greater thing, you would have done it, and you would have done it happily, right? And again, I want to liken this. I don't want to spiritualize the whole text, but I think we can see in this another instance of a modern coincidence where people think of salvation as something that should be difficult. People think of salvation as something that I should have to work for this. And I've said this in the past as well. People have this idea of how could something as good and important as salvation actually be free? Well, here, Naaman was thinking, I have this, tremendously detrimental disease. I should have to do something great. I should have to do something, difficult to get rid of it. Why would he ask me to do something so simple? And that's why he gets mad. And his servant comes and tells him the truth. Listen, he could have made it really hard, but he didn't. And you would have been happy if he did. Why don't you just go do this? And so Naaman knows that his servant is correct. And I want to say this. I think this speaks to his character. He doesn't yell at this guy. He doesn't reprimand him. He doesn't do anything negative to him. Again, as far as we're told, he believes him. He understands him. He listens, and he agrees. And he goes. He goes to the Jordan. He dips himself 7 times. And just as Elisha said, on the 7th time he comes up and he's cleansed. It tells us at the end of verse 14, his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. This was almost a new creature. You could use the language, I think. And so Naaman comes back here a changed man. So we read through verse 14. Let's pick it up in verse 15. And he returned to the man of God. He is no God in all the earth but in Israel. Now, therefore, I pray thee, take a blessing of thy servant. But he said, as the Lord liveth, before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. And Naaman said, shall there not then, I pray thee, be given to thy servant? And thy servant there in verse 17 is Naaman referring to himself. He said, shall I pray thee, be given to thy servant 2 mules burden of earth? For thy servant will henceforth offer neither burnt offering nor sacrifice unto other gods, but unto the Lord. In this thing the Lord pardon my servant, that when my master goeth into the house of Rimmon to worship there, and he leadeth on in my hand, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, when I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, the Lord pardoned thy servant in this thing. And he said unto him, go in peace. And so he departed from him a little way. I'll go ahead and pause there, and we'll pick it up in a second. And so Naaman comes back a very changed individual. It is very obvious by his response here that he comes back with faith in God. He left a pagan. He came back a believer, a follower of God. And so he tells him, he says, behold, now I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. And so he comes back and he wants to bless the prophet. And I think this is a natural response. And I think this is what anybody really would have wanted to do. And he wants to bless Elisha. I mean, I don't think we can really understand how significant a life change this is. To go from not only having leprosy, but to go from being a pagan having leprosy to return back a follower of God having literally brand new skin almost, right? I mean, this is a dramatic change in this guy's life. And so he wants to bless Elisha, but Elisha refuses to take any. And we'll talk more about that in a moment as to why I think he refused. But nevertheless, he refused to take it. And so Naaman shows his commitment then to God. But he does it. He has a commitment that is immature, because Naaman's faith is immature. This is brand new to him. But there's 2 things that he does here that I think show a strong commitment that is just immature in the way that he does it, okay? And so first he requests to take back 2 mule loads of dirt. And we have to have a little bit of an understanding. There was a widespread, it wasn't universal, but there was a widespread belief that in paganism, that you had to worship a god in the proper territory, right? And so gods were seen almost at times as geographical. And so he, again, this is all still new to him. And so if I'm going to worship Israel's God, I have to do it on Israel's land. And so this was a carryover, you could say, of his pagan belief. And so he says, I need some dirt from Israel to bring back so that when I'm worshiping God and God alone, I'm doing it properly. That's what he wants to do. He wants to worship God properly. He's just immaturely understanding what proper worship is. He's not there yet. He'll get there, but he's just not there yet. And so he says, let me take some dirt back. It's misguided commitment, but it is commitment, and that's to be commended. And so we see further. And some people actually would disagree with what I'm about to say on this one. But in verse 18, he says, I'm seeking a pardon. Now he's speaking to Elisha, but he's honestly speaking to God. I'm seeking a pardon. I'm seeking forgiveness, because essentially what he's going to say is part of my post, part of my position as captain of the host. It is my job to accompany the king of Syria when he goes into worship Rimmon, who would have been kind of the chief Syrian god. And so he's going to go in the temple, and I have to go with him because it's part of my job. He's going to go in the temple, and so I have to bow with him because it's just part of the territory. I'm seeking forgiveness on this. I'm not worshiping Rimmon. That's what he's saying. I'm not doing this in a posture of worship. I'm doing it as a matter of my job. And so some people get a little upset about this, and they say, well, that was compromise. He shouldn't have done this. And maybe it's true. Maybe it's true that he shouldn't have done this. But I think the key thing here is that Elisha tells him in verse 19, go in peace. And I don't think Elisha would have said go in peace if this was something incredibly sinful and detrimental to this man's faith. I don't think he would have done that. And I think Naaman understood, and I think Elisha understood that this was just a job. This was not worship. Now, again, I'm not encouraging this kind of behavior, but in this particular context and at that particular time and culture, I don't see this as anything overly. I will run after him and take someone of him. And so Gehazi followed after Naaman, and when Naaman saw him running after him, he lighted down from the chariot to meet him, and he said, is all well? And he said, all is well. My master hath sent me, saying, behold, even now there be come to me from Mount Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Give them, I pray thee, a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments. And Naaman said, be content, take 2 talents. And he urged him, and he bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of garments. And he laid them upon 2 of his servants, and they bare them before him. And when he came to the tower, he took from their hand, and he bestowed them in the house, and he let them in go, and they departed. But he went in, and he stood before his master. And Elisha said unto him, whence comest thou, Gehazi? And he said, thy servant went no whither. And he said unto him, went not mine heart with thee when the man turned again from his chariot to meet thee? Is it a time to receive money, and receive garments, and oliveyards, and vineyards, and sheep, and oxen, and men servants, and maidservants? He says, the leprosy therefore of Naaman shall cleave unto thee, and unto thy seed forever. And he went out from his presence a leper as white as snow. And so earlier, Naaman had tried to give Elisha these gifts, and he refused. And I genuinely believe that the reason Elisha refused is because he wanted to instill in this new Christian who is coming out of this pagan system that the goodness of God is not something that can be purchased. And the reason why this would have been so important is because that wasn't true in the pagan system, right? As we talked about earlier, in the pagan system, if you wanted something, what did you do? You enticed the God to give it to you, right? That's how paganism works. And so Elisha wants to instill in this man that this is grace. This is grace from God. This is not a debt that God is paying you back, right? No, this is the grace of God. And so he doesn't want to take from Naaman here. Again, I believe, we're not explicitly told here, but I believe that's what he's saying. And he tells Gehazi in verse 27, or verse 26 rather, he says, is this the time to do this? Insinuating that there are times where it is appropriate. This isn't one of them. Right? Why is this not one of them? Because we don't want to give this man the wrong impression of who this God that he's serving is. We don't want to even give him the thought that this is just another one of the pagan gods. No, this is a totally different situation. And so we want to give him the right understanding. But here, Gehazi, he was upset. He doesn't like the fact that Elisha, that he rejects this and then he doesn't take any gifts. So he runs after Naaman. He makes up this lie that some people had visited Elisha, and so now he's asking for changes of garments for them, right? And so he tries to warp this lie a little bit to say it's still not really for Elisha, but Elisha asked for it, and again, none of that's true. And so Naaman was, I'm sure, thrilled to give these gifts. He was probably absolutely overjoyed to be able to give, but nevertheless, Gehazi takes it, he stashes away the gifts, and then he lies again to Elisha. Elisha knows what had happened. Probably God had revealed this to him. He already knows what's happened, so he asks him, where'd you go? And he lies to Elisha. I didn't go anywhere. I don't even know what you're talking about. And so he had a strong covetousness in his heart, and because of this covetousness, again, he dragged the name of God through the mud. And so it's not just that Gehazi was coveting silver and gold and these changes of raiment, right? That's bad. I'm not saying that's good. That's still sin. But the majority sin here is that he is impressing upon Naaman that our God's not really any different, right? And that's one of the worst things we can tell the world. One of the worst things we can tell the world is, hey, come join us and serve our God. And by the way, nothing really changes. He's not really different. You can still live and do and think and act, and nothing really has to change because our God's not really any different from anything you're already serving. That could not be farther from the truth. And so here, Gehazi gives this bad impression. And so Elisha tells him, he says, the leprosy, therefore, of Naaman shall cleave unto you, and unto thy seed forever. And he went out from his presence a leper as white as snow. And so I'll close with a couple of quotes here. Raymond Dillard, he said, Gehazi was undoing what God had done. God wanted Naaman to know his free grace, but Gehazi was trying to put a price on the goodness of God. The God of Israel did not accept bribes. He would not be manipulated by money or make room for human pride. His grace was free. Gehazi was implying otherwise, and it would be at great cost to him. And then Warren Wiersbe, he said, the covetousness that ate away at his heart became leprosy eating away at his body. And so again, a very potent story, an illustration. And like I said, probably one of the more well-known stories involving Elisha. And Elisha is by and large kind of a minor secondary character in this story. But nevertheless, it's important, and it serves to show us some very important principles and lessons. Okay.